Eleanor. That's the name the baby said. No one in the row had spoken it. No one on that flight had worn it as a badge or whispered it in passing. But when the toddler in 17B turned toward the overhead vent and pointed, his eyes wide, unblinking, his mother froze. "Eleanor," he said again, as if calling someone from behind the veil of air, past the aisle, through the fuselage, into some place colder than the cabin temperature could ever reach. A few passengers chuckled nervously, brushing it off like, "Kids do strange things." But I watched the woman in 3A grip the armrest so hard, her knuckles paled to bone. That name, Eleanor, meant something to her. She mouthed it once, twice, before reaching for the call button like it might save her from drowning. I was seated in 7C, close enough to feel the shift in the air, far enough to pretend I hadn't noticed. But I did. Everyone did. The way the flight attendant in red heels hesitated before approaching. How her perfectly practiced smile faltered like a mask cracking. Her name tag read, Sloane. Her skin tight around her jawline, her eyes refusing to land on the woman trembling in 3A. Instead, she turned toward the back and slapped the black woman in 21F. Just like that. No warning. No words. A sharp crack that cut the hum of altitude silence into two realities, before and after. People screamed, phones went up, confusion spread like spilled coffee down the aisle. But here's the thing no one wants to say. It wasn't about the slap, because before her head turned back, before the gasp from the row behind me, before the captain's voice tried to contain a situation spiraling into nightmare, the black woman, poised, silent, dressed like Wall Street power on vacation, leaned in and whispered something into Sloane's ear. No one else heard it, not even the man beside her who wore headphones and blinked like he'd just missed a gunshot. But Sloane heard, and her face crumbled. People are trying to bury what happened next. You won't find it on any official report, no passenger manifest, no media coverage except for a short clip that randomly disappeared hours after trending. But she vanished. The woman in 21F, gone midair. They landed with an empty seat, a folded blanket, and a tray still holding untouched. Champagne. The airline claimed an emergency reroute. That's a lie. The pilot said there was turbulence. That's another lie. I was there. I saw the moment the fabric of this reality wrinkled. And maybe you're wondering, what does this have to do with a billion-dollar deal? Everything. Because 48 hours later, a New York venture collapsed. 30,000 jobs vanished, just like she did. The CEO behind it all, the man with the grin and the money and the God complex, was her fiancé. She left him one voicemail, 11 seconds, no words, just wind. But the real question isn't how she disappeared. It's what she whispered, and why the flight attendant hasn't spoken a word since. The moment Sloane's lips closed over, that whisper, the one no one else could hear, the world tilted, but what followed after wasn't quite what anyone expects when they say someone vanished. Because the next morning, when I woke, everything had already started to unravel. The memory of that slap, the baby's voice, Eleanor's name, the woman's disappearance, they felt less like events I witnessed, and more like fragments from a dream I was trying desperately to piece together, except the edges kept bleeding. Warping? I found myself searching for the footage everyone swore existed, the cabin cameras, the shaky videos from passengers, but they were gone. The airline's website had no press release, no apology, no mention of an incident. And the clips I saw on social media, the ones that had made headlines for a few hours, had vanished without a trace. It was as if the internet swallowed that moment whole. But more unsettling was what came next. My phone started acting up. Distorted voices threaded through my voicemail inbox, half a sentence, a word repeated, Eleanor, Eleanor, in a tone that wasn't quite human, not quite machine. I deleted the messages, tried to ignore the creeping sensation that someone or something was watching from the edges of my reality. My friends asked if I'd slept well. They didn't ask about the flight. Did they see the video? Did they hear the baby? I could feel their eyes skimming over me, avoiding the cracks in my story, the questions I kept pushing away. The thing is, I began doubting my own mind. Was I fractured? Sleep deprived? Or had I stumbled onto a truth so deep, so carefully, buried, that my own memory was betraying me to protect what lies beneath? I tried to replay that moment in my head, the slap, the whispered name, the woman vanishing. But each time the scene blurred, shadows filling the spaces between details like ink bleeding into water. I started to notice missing minutes in my day, conversations half remembered or erased completely, like my brain was softening edges it didn't want to hold. And then came Alex. Alex appeared like a ghost in the fog of my unraveling mind. He wasn't someone I knew well, just a guy I'd met at a coffee shop a week before the flight, the kind of person who carries a story you don't want to hear but can't stop listening to anyway. His eyes had a flicker, a desperate something that made me question if he was the one with answers, or just another fragment of my fractured reality. He called me the day after the flight, voice low, urgent, but when I asked if he'd seen the footage or heard about the woman, he laughed it off, told me it was just a story people like to chase to feel alive. You want the truth behind what no one tells you? He said. Maybe the truth is that there's no truth, only what your mind makes up when it's trying to heal. His words hit me like ice, but I couldn't tell if he was warning or mocking. Alex insisted he'd recorded something on that flight, something strange on the plane's intercom system, static and whispering voices beneath the pilot's announcements. When I asked for the recording, he hesitated, said it might not be what I wanted to hear. When he finally sent the file, I listened with headphones pressed tight to my ears. The static hummed, then a faint voice cracked through, repeating the name Eleanor in a loop. But the voice sounded distorted, layered over itself, impossible to place. Halfway through, the recording glitched, and my own voice echoed back at me, soft, asking, was she ever really there? The fear wasn't just in the unanswered questions. It was in the silence that filled those answers. Was the woman a victim of something real, or a phantom born of collective paranoia? Was Sloane truly a flight attendant or a symbol stitched into a nightmare to keep some larger secret from leaking? Did the billionaire deal unravel because of human greed, or because reality itself was cracking under the weight of something we can't see, can't understand? The real unsolved mystery wasn't just what happened in that plane cabin. It was what happened to all of us after we dared to look. I felt my grip on the world slipping, faces around me blurred, conversations fractured into half words, memories flickered and died. I was sinking, drowning in a silence louder than any shout, and just when I thought I might break, I found a note tucked inside the back pocket of my airplane seat, a scrap of paper trembling with hurried handwriting, only 2 words written in red ink. Don't forget. What didn't I remember? What were they trying to hide? And how much of this nightmare was mine to bear alone? The day I thought I'd found the truth feels like a cruel joke now, a fragile veneer cracking beneath the weight of something darker, something that's been lurking just beyond the edges of memory, watching patiently through the cracks in my mind. It started with a lead. An anonymous message slipped under my apartment door in the dead of night, a single phrase scrawled in shaky handwriting. Look to the fire in 97. It seemed like nonsense at first, just another ghost of a clue, but it tugged at something buried deep inside me, a fragment I couldn't quite place but knew had been hidden away, sealed beneath years of silence and forgetting. I spent days digging through old archives, forgotten newspapers, and brittle VHS tapes, my fingers trembling as I rewound the grainy footage again and again until the image sharpened. A fire, small and contained, had broken out in a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of Atlanta in 97. A young woman, eerily familiar in the flickering flames, was pulled from the smoke by a figure whose face was forever obscured by shadow and ash. The news clip didn't say much, but local whispers spoke of a mysterious disappearance that followed. A tenant who never truly existed in official records, someone the police never found a trace of, someone people stopped mentioning entirely. It was a story folded into the margins, a memory glitch written out of existence. And that name, the one the baby whispered Eleanor, was tied to it, like a whisper echoing through generations. The similarities struck me like a punch to the gut. The vanished woman midair, the unknown passenger erased from flight records, the shadowed flight attendant who couldn't or wouldn't speak about what she knew. I was staring at the hidden truth, the puzzle pieces clicking together into a dark, grotesque picture. I felt close enough to touch it, to unravel the threads tangled across time, to finally understand what had been lurking beneath the surface all along. The world made sense again, just for a moment. The mystery uncovered. I was no longer crazy. They lied to me. Someone was hiding this. Someone wanted us to forget, but that's when everything began to unravel. That night I found myself standing outside an abandoned building near the old fire site, the place marked on a faded city map and pulsing with a strange, uneasy energy. The air was thick with a scent I couldn't name, smoke, salt, and something metallic like blood. I pushed open the heavy door which groaned on rusted hinges and stepped inside. The shadows moved around me like living things. Somewhere deep inside, I felt a presence. Something watching, waiting. The kind of watchfulness that burrows into your skin, settles in your bones, and refuses to leave. As I explored, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You're not ready. You never were. My heart hammered as a cold wave of dread slithered down my spine. I tried to leave, but the exit wasn't where it had been. The walls seemed to breathe, shifting with a rhythm that matched my own faltering breath. Time dissolved. Memories slipped, warped, looped back on themselves. I saw flashes, faces I knew, places I'd forgotten, moments from my childhood where fear had first taken root, unspoken and unnamed. The past bled into the present, indistinguishable and raw. Then, in a moment that shattered everything, I found a small, cracked mirror propped against the wall. My reflection stared back, but something was wrong. The eyes staring from the glass didn't belong to me. They were hollow, haunted, familiar yet alien. And as I reached out to touch the glass, the reflection smiled. It wasn't me. The presence I'd felt all along. The silent watcher had been inside me, threading through my memories, shaping my fears. It had been there before the flight, before the fire, before I even knew I was looking. It thrived on what we tried to forget, on the silence we all kept. It was deeply personal, a shadow stitched into the fabric of who I was, a force that turned our own minds into prisons. I stumbled back, breath ragged, heart pounding. The building whispered secrets I couldn't understand, but felt in every nerve, ending. And as I fled into the night, the cold truth settled over me like a second skin. Everything I thought I knew. The slap, the vanishing, the name Eleanor, the broken deal. It was just the surface. The story we'd been told to chase was a distraction, a puzzle designed to keep us busy, while something far more dangerous watched, waited, and whispered in the darkness of our own minds. The twist, the thing that forces you to look back over. Every word, every frame, every heartbeat of this story is this: the woman who vanished midair. She wasn't a victim. She was the key. And in realizing that, everything shifts. The mystery doesn't end here. It's just beginning. The nightmare we thought we were unraveling was never outside of us. It's been inside all along, lurking beneath the surface of what we choose to remember and what they don't want you to see. So go back, watch it again. Because you missed the part where the real story began. I thought I was alone in this. The fractured memories, the relentless whispers in the dark, the feeling that reality was slowly unraveling beneath my feet. But I wasn't, not by a long shot. The truth, the real hidden truth that no one dares to speak aloud, is that there are others, dozens, maybe hundreds, who have been watching, waiting, piecing together fragments of a puzzle no one's ever meant to solve. You were right all along, though nobody believed you. The signs, the patterns, the glitches in the stories, they aren't just random. They're messages, woven carefully into the fabric of our lives, meant for eyes that look too closely, ears that listen too deeply, It started with the messages, cryptic emails with no sender, arriving in the dead hours of the night, filled with strings of numbers and symbols, seemingly nonsensical, but somehow, they spoke directly to the parts of me that refused to forget. One message contained a grainy photo, what looked like found footage from 20 years ago, showing a figure standing alone in a shadowed airport terminal. The timestamp glitched, the faces blurred. Yet the figure held a necklace with a tiny emblem, an unfamiliar symbol I'd seen flicker in my dreams, a shape that seemed to burn itself into the back of my mind like a warning or a brand. The symbol wasn't just an image, it was a language, one that only the initiated could decode. I tried to explain it, but the words felt hollow, like trying to describe a nightmare to someone who's never slept. And the dreams, they came every night now, shared dreams, I realized, as if I wasn't alone in that space between sleep and waking. Other voices echoed there, whispers in the dark, telling stories that felt both deeply personal and terrifyingly universal. Faces I'd never met but recognized from these fragmented memories spoke to me, warned me, or sometimes just stared silently, their eyes full of secrets. Sometimes I woke with scribbled notes on my nightstand, notes I was sure I hadn't written, symbols and phrases that hinted at a conspiracy sprawling wider than any headline could reveal. What the government never released, what the mainstream refused to see, was all tangled in these fragments of hidden knowledge, like a spider's web too delicate to break but strong enough to trap the unwary. It's hard to say who's really in control anymore, or what it even means to be you when memory is a currency that can be spent, stolen, or erased. Identity, once so solid, feels like sand slipping through fingers. Was I the same person who boarded that flight? Was the voice that whispered, Eleanor mine or someone else's? These questions aren't just philosophical anymore, they're urgent, bone deep, and they threaten to swallow every certainty I had left. The veil is thinning, and behind it isn't clarity but more shadows, more questions, more watching eyes. That's when she appeared, the observer. Not a savior or a guide, but something different. A woman whose presence felt both impossibly close and impossibly distant, like she existed on the edges of the very fabric of this fractured reality. She claimed to have been tracking this from the beginning, collecting stories like mine, watching the ripple effects, and perhaps waiting for someone to notice. Her voice was low, calm, and full of something I couldn't name: authority, desperation, or maybe just deep exhaustion. She spoke in riddles, telling me that this wasn't just my story or the flight attendant's or the vanished woman's. It was a story about control, about forces older and more insidious than any headline, a force that shapes what we remember and what we forget, what we see and what we don't. You're not just a witness, she said. You're part of it, but so are all the others. We're threads in the same web, and the web is alive. It watches, waits, decides who remembers and who doesn't. It's never been about what happened on that flight alone. It's about the quiet power beneath, the slow erasure of truth itself. Her words settled over me like a weight, a suffocating blanket of dread that somehow also sparked a fierce, desperate need to keep searching, to keep uncovering. Because if the stories we cling to are shaped by something that's been watching all along, then every memory, every detail, every glimpse of the past we think we understand needs to be questioned. The conspiracy isn't out there. It's inside, woven into the very way we perceive reality. And now, as the lines blur and the watchers close in, the question isn't just what happened to the woman on the plane, or what the whispered name meant. It's what we are becoming. How much of our own story is ours and how much has been written for us. The web tightens, the watchers wait, and you're part of this, whether you see it or not. There's no end to this story yet, only the cold electric pulse of what's to come. I stood at the edge of everything I thought I knew, the darkness pressing in from all sides, the weight of memories not quite mine settling deep in my chest like a stone. The mystery wasn't about what happened on that plane anymore. It was about why it happened, why the name Eleanor slipped through time like a ghost's sigh, why the woman vanished into thin air, why the world seemed to shift and falter whenever we looked too closely. It was about what those fractures reveal, not just about a story long buried, but about us, about who we are when the masks slip and the illusions fall away. For years, I'd searched for answers in shadows, in cryptic messages, in faces blurred by time and fear. But now I saw the truth in a new light. It wasn't the event itself that mattered. It was the silence that followed, the willful forgetting, the invisible hands that rewrote memory to keep us safe, or at least pretending to. This wasn't just a conspiracy of facts, but of existence. It was a story about control, yes, but also about vulnerability, about the fragile, aching human need to find meaning in chaos, to hold on to something real even when reality feels like a lie. I felt the presence of that force again, the watcher, the silent witness to all our fractures, and for the first time I didn't want to run. I wanted to know why it chose me, why it let me see the cracks no one else could. The answer came not in whispers or shadows, but in a confession so raw, so unbearably human. It broke me. I realized that Eleanor was more than a name. She was a choice to disappear from a world too cruel, too broken, a choice to burn the threads that bound her to pain and lies, a choice that left scars on everyone she touched, including me. The painful truth was that I was part of this cycle, carrying memories not just of others, but of my own losses, my own betrayals, my own silences. I'd buried parts of myself deep, hoping they'd never rise, but they did, tangled up in the mystery I chased. The woman's disappearance wasn't just a puzzle to solve. It was a mirror held up to my own soul, reflecting fears I'd never faced and wounds I'd never allowed myself to heal. Standing there, I knew the path forward was a choice no one can make lightly. To face the truth might destroy me, unravel the fragile thread of who I thought I was, but to ignore it meant living in a lie, a prison of forgetfulness and denial. In that moment, the weight of all the watching eyes, the silent watchers within and without pressed down like a storm, I realized the awakening I feared was not an end, but a beginning, a terrifying, beautiful unraveling that strips away pretense and leaves only raw, aching humanity. This story, this mystery, is not just about a vanished woman or a broken deal. It's about the shadows we all carry, the memories we choose to hold or discard, and the painful, breathtaking truth that we are all part of something larger, something we barely understand but feel with every heartbeat. So I stand here now, not with answers but with questions that will haunt the quiet corners of your mind, long after the screen fades to black. The line between waking and dreaming is thinner than you think, and sometimes the most terrifying truth is the one you carry inside yourself. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.